Question, this week we're going to change up the discussion a little bit. Normally we speak on the power of books. We are still going to reflect on books and articles, but this week we're going to focus on our history. As we all know, Juneteenth is coming up. It is next week. And often in our history, we have failed to celebrate this month because have always been taught and educated on celebrating July the 4th, which is not our history. If we look back into our history, we learned that Frederick Douglass also wrote a speech saying, "What is the 4th of July to a slave?" Because we were celebrating the 4th of July, but we were still enslaved. And the 4th of July is supposed to represent independence, but it does not represent our independence. So we're going to reflect on our history, on how we can change the narrative, on what we need to do as a community, and also how can we come together to better ourselves and educate ourselves. So before we start, does anyone have any questions before we actually get into the topic? Okay, thank you.
No.
All right, let's begin. All right, Doris, I know you were speaking on a book that you had. Would you enlighten us on the book that you've been reading?
Yes, well, I'm a subscriber to Roland and Martin Unfiltered, and I watch a lot of the history that they bring to light, and a lot of things I've heard heard them talk about. I had no idea that was going on. So Dr. Carr, he's a professor at Howard University, African Studies. He was talking, it was a subject dealing with race. And there's always something dealing with race, but he said that to educate yourself, he was saying you need to read the book, The Color of Law. So I got this book, The Color of Law, and it's written by a white man named Richard Rosenstein. Richard Rosenstein. And this book said The Color of Law, a forgotten history of how our government segregated America. And so I've read 13 pages of it. And I found it's so much I have learned how the government actually really segregated America. How San Francisco, how they did Black people, especially with housing, housing, white contractors. It was pure racism against Black individuals, and they didn't hide it. If Black individuals weren't allowed to live in certain communities. And when they felt that Blacks were getting too close or one move in, the government, their architect, construction company, the government would hire a construction company to come in and start a new suburb out with 700 houses. No African Americans can get a house. None. If that contractor allowed African Americans to purchase a house, that contractor was blackballed. He couldn't do anything. Those contractors were getting loans at very, very low interest rates. Black people couldn't afford any housing. They were living in tents, cardboard boxes, boards from a shipyard. And have you all realized that most houses and I'm talking about in San Francisco, California, they were built by railroad tracks. They built their houses by railroad tracks, shipyards. But the other people houses were out in the suburb, the nice areas. The Black people houses were so poorly constructed that those houses were falling apart. They wouldn't last long. They had to, white people houses was constructed where they would build an extra room on there for the war. And this was talking about the war. The name they gave it was the war guest, helping veterans after the war and setting them up. But they wasn't setting the Black people that come after the war. So it is a good read. I hadn't finished chapter 1, and chapter 1 is entitled, and it talks about where Joseph Lee Jones and his wife, Barbara Jones, sued Alpha H. Meyer Company, a St. Louis developer who refused to sell them a home solely because Mr. Jones was black. His wife was white, but Mr. Jones was black. So they couldn't get a house because he was black. You know, and they sued and they won. But the name of the first chapter says, if San Francisco, then everywhere. And this happens in a lot of places, but it is very interesting. And when Dr. Carr mentioned that, that the color of law stayed in my head. And I had to get that book to see what it's all about. And it's a good read if you want to know the history of how the government played a part in segregation in the United States.
I also before I just fully delve into it, thank you for letting us know the title of the book, because from what a lot of us don't know, Shell was a history teacher and so was I. And I didn't learn a lot about our history. Now, true enough, if any of us can reflect on here, we have all learned about some part of our history in our textbooks from school. But a lot of things we were misinterpreted about because they don't want them in the school books. The state of Tennessee has signed a law to remove certain part of our history out of the history books, because I think they're getting to a point now they're realizing maybe it excites violence. And what a lot of people do not know is the Black Panthers are the only group that really much have been in the United States of America that have been listed as a terrorist group. Even though the KKK has took a lot of lives from a lot of people, they are still not listed as terrorists, but the Black Panthers are. Meaning if anyone's seen Black Panthers, they can shoot them on sight because they feel like Black Panthers excited riots and they were built upon violence. And we missed that part in our history. We also have a part in our history where they reflect on Black codes. We had the Black codes before we were segregated. Has any one of us on here, because often I have heard African Americans say they have never been discriminated against or seen a form of racism. Can anyone reflect on a time where they have been a victim of racism, not necessarily by the white community, because often we are victims of racism within our own community. Can anyone speak on being a victim of racism within their own community?
Yes. Well, I've seen racism in our own community. I've seen racism in our Black churches where, you know, where you have a set of individuals in your church, in the church, where they know what kind of job you have. If you have a nice paying job, you have pretty much reign in the church. But if you have those low paying jobs, nobody in the church will listen to you. Now I've seen that in the church, you know.
I agree with that.
I've seen that in the schools. I've seen it in the schools. You know, they have a thing called a good teacher and a bad teacher. What is a good teacher? What is a bad teacher? You know, how do you define that? Because you're quiet and you don't rock the boat, you're a good teacher? Or if you see something going on, you speak out about it, you're a bad teacher? Or if your scores are low, are you a bad teacher? If your scores are high, are you a good teacher? Or if your scores are high every year and you win the prize money and you go and receive awards by other companies, are you a good teacher? Even though we find out later you cheated. You know, you cheated to get the money and you cheated to get the other award, you know. So I've seen that in the school, segregation in the school amongst our skin color. I've seen it in the church. I've seen it in the school. I've seen it on the job. I have seen it all. And sometimes I may have participated unknowingly participated. And then sometimes knowingly participated. But as I have begun to educate myself on the color of law, on Black codes, Jim Crow, Reconstruction era, 1619 Project, the critical race theory, my mindset is changed. My mindset have changed.
I think it
And
has to, and I think,
a
and
lot
I
of
think,
us, we are educated. I am educated. I have an education, but I'm just now getting educated.
it's true. I think a lot of things were we misinterpreted. I think in the Black community coming out of slavery, and once they started the civil rights movement, it changed. We started to re-enslave ourselves because everything was a matter of money. As you said, even in the churches, you have a higher status in the church if you came from what they call a good family background. And the only thing made that family background was good if you had a status of your family had more money. Even in the schoolhouse, certain children are discriminated against because of who their parents are. If your parents had a title or a last name, the kids got pushed further and they was helped further along. But if your family had a status quo of a title, your child got left behind. We have seen it in the schools. And it's like money is the thing that reshaped America for the Black community. Like I said, even, and this is the sad part, we are encouraged to buy land. When we came out of slavery, what they were saying, we were promised 40 acres and a mule. And sadly, some of us are still looking for that same 40 acres and a mule. We still move in neighborhoods where we're not wanted, but we feel like, well, slavery has passed, so we have a right to live in this neighborhood. But for me, where I never understood, even still as a Black woman to this day, and it's still certain neighborhoods I don't want to live in, not because I feel like I have a right to live there, because I don't want to be nowhere where I'm not wanted. I don't want to fight to live in a neighborhood where I have to pay you $100,000 to be in a neighborhood where you don't want me there. I was reading an article and it was about a Black family, and they were saying they was one of the first Black families in this community in Texas. And she said her husband was a pro football player, and she said they started to overlook things until it actually hit home with one of her own children where he was being discriminated against in school, and he got in trouble, and they was trying to punish him to the full extent of the law. She said she saw it happen with small other Black families that lived in that community, but it wasn't until it hit home with her because her status had changed. Her husband had passed away and they had less of the money. So that's why I was asking the questions like, do we actually see it as our own communities, and how can we change the narrative? Kim,
I
you
think,
Uh,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Kim.
go ahead. I think maybe her mic is just on. Go ahead, Leora.
Okay, I was just going to say, well, I'll probably be going back to what Ms. Boers was saying earlier, as far as the law. Even when we consider the French and Indian War, which was before the Revolutionary War, when they came in and took land from the natives that were already here, our forefathers, we find that they actually sued. They sued through the Supreme Court to stay on their land, and the president that we had at the time, he did not care. So it's a systematic, ongoing, systemic problem as it relates to the law. The law is the foundation of the racial issues, and I think that it goes beyond black and white. I know that it does. And it is all about money. It was all about money for the natives, and it's all about money today, which makes it beyond a black and a white thing. And as far as that last question, my opinion is, how can we, make it different, is to be that change. And that requires us to be uncomfortable. Moving in those black neighborhoods gave other families permission. I mean, in those white neighborhoods, it gave other black families permission to move in those neighborhoods. And as we began to move in those neighborhoods, we're not going to be comfortable. And nobody that has initiated real change was ever comfortable doing it. And there comes a time when you may actually, lose your life, even today, standing up for what is right. And it's just one of those things. But I think a prerequisite is to be uncomfortable.
and that 40, let me mention something about that 40 acres and a mule and the forefathers. The forefathers, the Constitution was written, all men are created equal. But that was a lie, because the forefathers owned slaves. So when they wrote all men are created equal, they were lying at that point. The
We were still
forefathers were
enslaved.
number, they were alcoholics, they were drunk, they were no Albert Einsteins, they were no smart people. They were just the average Joe. and everything. And that's why, and then the 40 acres and a mule. I think the 40 acres and a mule was given during the time of, I think, Abraham Lincoln. If I'm not right now, y'all let correct me, under Abraham Lincoln. And what they did was they had taken some land from the white settlers and given to the African Americans for agricultural purpose and the start. Now, after Abraham Lincoln assassination, Andrew Johnson became president, and the land that they hadn't given to the blacks, I think it was maybe 370 acres, he gave it back to the white people. He gave it back to them. Everything, he tried to undo everything Abraham Lincoln had done. And it was one other point. The 16, I think Lenore had mentioned something doing some talking about something. The history, I think the last point you were making, Lenore. I forgot what that
be
was.
Uncomfortable. Was it talking about being uncomfortable? Well, I always started with the French and Indian War. Because that's where it all started. And if you look at the first U.S. Census, there were 2 natives listed, and I think 9 slaves. But at that time, we didn't have a lot of slaves over. So the Native Americans were the slaves. And we ended up having the French and Indian War. Of course, the Car Pontiac, he was a native warrior. But what you're mentioning is the Emancipation Proclamation, and to emancipate means to be free, and you're proclaiming that freedom, in which it was Abraham Lincoln. But during that time, we had the Civil War. So you had the North that had come in, and the North and the South were in a fight. So the president wanted to end that fight. He wasn't doing it to free the slaves, but because he signed the Emancipation. That's right. And he signed the Emancipation Proclamation. And when he signed that, it was a change made to the Constitution. So then it became a law where you had to free these people. So you had slaves who've been slaves, but now it's like, get out, get out. You are no longer a slave. You can't stay on my property no more.
Right.
So you have family.
But that was,
it was one thing
when
that
he
they
signed
missed.
the
Oh, I'm sorry.
But I only mentioned that for the 40 acres and a mule part.
Right.
So
and the only reason why I'm mentioning 40 acres and a mule, because some of us, and like you said, it's uncomfortable. But the thing what I don't understand about blacks, and even we have to be uncomfortable. Martin Luther King Jr. even made a speech, and even in his speech, he said he knew he was gonna die at an early age because he knew what he was trying to do, because sometimes people have to die so we can live. If we even go back to the biblical time, Jesus was birthed so he could die in order for us to live and be forgiven for our sins. So it has already been written. But a lot of things that we misconcept as Black people, just because we want to be accepted does not mean we have to be accepted. We're always walking into something that someone else started. We have to be uncomfortable and powerful enough to make our own. Coming out of the civil rights movement, not the Civil War, Black people own more businesses then because they pushed the envelope. They were not scared to go broke. They gave each other rides. They boycotted the bus. It was strictly Black. Anything was white owned, we don't spend our dollars there because they need our dollars. In order for us to make a change, we have to stop constantly looking for that 40 acres and a mule, or like Martin Luther King Jr. said in his I Have a Dream speech, we're still waiting for someone to pass that buck. Unfortunately, we do have to be uncomfortable. We do have to stop looking at situations as black and white. But until they start seeing us as equal, because they don't see us as equal, they see us as a number where we can check in and work their jobs. And not all of them are the same, because we often forget, even with the Underground Railroad, white people helped us out of slavery. The Quakers did. John Brown was a radical for blacks, helping them come out of slavery. Harriet Tubman risked their lives to come back for so many African Americans. They used biblical scriptures in the Northern Star to walk to freedom in slavery. We want to take the church out of everything as well, because we feel like I said, the church discriminates against us. The church was so proactive to help remove slavery, but now the church has changed because the church is all about their dollars. We have to be uncomfortable and have these conversations, and unfortunately some of us are going to die so others can live. We have to change the narrative. We have to be uncomfortable. We also have to be comfortable enough to start rebuilding our own.
And we have to realize that, yes, the Emancipation Proclamation became a legal document, but it has nothing to do with the social economics as far as outside, as far as individual people, because individual people were still enslaving and treating people the way they wanted to. So it really didn't stop. In one way, it was a legal document, but that didn't change the mind of the people. The people kept oppressing and depressing and enslaving people. They didn't stop.
They
And
didn't
they
stop. And
still
then
hadn't stopped.
another thing that they missed, even in the Emancipation Proclamation, when they signed the 13th Amendment into law, the 13th Amendment had a clause in there saying that only reason they were signing it was so they can pay off the war debt, because they was in debt. They wanted to stop the North versus South, because it cost a lot of money. So within that 13th Amendment, we were still seen solely as property. Then they started with the 14th and the 15th Amendment, but those amendments still did not apply to us, because they had to go back and rectify the 14th Amendment. Everything that they did was not a protection of us. We give Abraham Lincoln, and I'm not gonna say we, so I'm sorry, y'all, because and I remember me and Leora having conversations about John Brown, because we didn't learn about John Brown when we was in school. We did not know of him helping slavery. We didn't hear about him. We only heard about Harriet Tubman. We speak of the same people in Black history, but we don't even speak about the first lady that actually sat on the bus and didn't move off her seat. We give the credit to Rosa Parks, but she was not the first one to start that movement. They didn't want, and I think what her name was, Colette Coleman or something, but they don't give the credit to her, because they said later on, because of her public life, because they said she got pregnant by a married man, so they took the credit away from her to give to Rosa Parks. But Rosa Parks was not the first to start that movement or that platform.
Mm. And now they want to continue to teach what we learned in school, like George Washington cut down the cherry tree. That was the biggest lie they ever been told. George Washington never cut down the cherry tree and took it to his father. George Washington really didn't know who his father was or spend any time around his father. So they want to, the Senator Mitch McConnell now, they pushing against the 1619 project and teaching of it and the critical race theory, because they want people to continue to pretend. They want people to see what they want America to be, not what America really was and still is. They don't want that to be known. That's why Senator Tim Scott, when he did his rebuttal after Biden's speech, he said, America is not a racist country. You from South Carolina, really? America, okay. We don't let yourself be used unless you got a purpose behind it.
Right, because sometimes that was the issue with Frederick Douglass and so many more during that time. Some of them had to be used in order to get some laws started, and they were okay with it. Frederick Douglass, he wrote Abraham Lincoln a lot of his speeches. He wrote, "What is the 4th of July to a slave?" Even though a lot of African Americans went against him, because he was pushing for war. He was pushing for the ideology of certain different things, but a lot of people wanted to denounce what he started, but he also helped those platforms and movements. And he was also a speaker in Lincoln ear, like, okay, in order for you to stop this war, you may as well go ahead and free the slaves, because if you free the slaves, now the slaves can vote and help the North get more votes, because they gonna come up here. We was always used for something, but at least it guaranteed us certain rights and freedom, so it's not gonna always be comfortable. And also I want to thank you, Mr. Loon, for joining us, because we do have a male perspective on this week as well, because during that time, as we're speaking on the forefathers, during that time we didn't have a voice, even though women did start a lot of movements, because I said Harriet Tubman, she led a lot to slavery. Even before her time, so Donna True wrote Ain't I Woman, meaning just because I do the work as a man still does not mean I don't want to be treated as a woman, because we discredit a lot of things. But during that time, when the men went off to war, doing what it was World War I or World War II, where all the women had to go and work in the industries that they started up north, where we had to work in the warehouses and stuff.
Yeah, and all that was segregated and racist. You could work together in the factories, in the car, Ford Motor Company and everything, but you could live in the same neighborhood, or you couldn't eat together, anything like that, but you could work together. Even in prison, the white prisoners had was separated. The white prisoner had a separate eating and sleeping place than the black prison. White prisoners couldn't even be chained up or handcuffed with a black prisoner. You know, and then these Jim Crow law, even the Emancipation Proclamation supposed to free the slave, the Jim Crow laws, they separated Americans by race in 26 states that Jim Crow law did. Jim Crow laws lasted nearly 100 years, from 1881 to 1964. From 1881 to 1964, the Jim Crow law still was in place.
Yeah.
I mean, and you can find out what laws each state had. You
Right,
know,
black,
and
right. The black
I mean,
code
it was
was state laws, but the Jim Crow laws were federal laws.
where it
And
was
they
civil laws and social customs now.
Yeah.
Social customs. So social customs deal with how white individuals and that Farmers Home Administration, these banks and everything, how they dealt with the African American people. And you know, in
And they
some of the
still do.
laws under the Jim Crow, under some of the laws in Jim Crow, according to certain states, if you read those laws, some states refer to black as Negroes. Some refer to blacks as colored, you know, colored people, and then Negro people, you know, which both of them are unacceptable. But, you know, it was just a lot of laws dealing with nurses. A nurse could not treat a black man. She could not treat a black male, you know, in a hospital. You know, restaurants, how, you know, you have the whites only, the colored only sections, and all of that fell under Jim Crow, you know. Interracial marriages was a big deal in every state. They hated interracial marriages. If a white woman in the state of Maryland, if a white woman got pregnant by an African American or any other race, she was in prison for less than 18 months. They put in prison. They was imprisoning people for interracial marriages.
They were in a lot of,
and interracial marriage still are looked frowned upon.
Yeah, they are still frowned
upon.
Right. We have a thing of thinking that we are not still slaves, but in some form, some of us are. We have changed our culture to the point of where our leaders are no longer, we don't pay attention to the senators. We have a culture now where they pay attention to the hip hop artists and different things like that. Kim shared a post earlier where they wanted to cancel a song because it was called Cater to You, but we have other songs that are more vulgar and more, it looks down on women, where it speaks of more sexual undertones versus the pride in who we are. We have taken a back seat and we stand on certain things all because it's money and it's dollars, even though we are still being bought and sold at a price. We will overlook things on jobs or stay quiet, or we won't help the next person we can see being discriminated against because we worry about, okay, if I lose my job, then what's going to happen? If I stand behind this person, then what's going to happen? We get on jobs and Black women can be our equal, but they will dislike us for whatever reason, and they would turn against us and work with others to help get us out of a system, all because of a standpoint we have. We don't accept and embrace each other in our own communities. It's like we have gotten to a point then coming out of those eras. The one thing that Black people did, even if they could agree to disagree, but at least they stood together. Or even if they did not, if like she was saying, they played it off in the forefronts, but they still went in churches later on in the storehouse and were letting us know, okay, this is what's going on. If I befriend this fellow white man, I'm gonna come back and tell my own people what's going on and tell them how to vote and how to work things out. Now they won't even do that. They'll sway you to vote because if they promise them, well, I'm gonna give y'all this. Even up north, when they had the Jim Crow laws, people, even though they migrated up north, they were still not legally eligible to vote unless they owned land or held a certain job title. They were still discriminated against. We look at the projects, and now they glorify projects, but projects was built so they can put us in a certain class and put all the Black people together because they feel like we were going to torture each other and tear each other down. It was not a place where they wanted to put us just so we can have housing, but now has come to a place to glorify. We call any apartment complexes or them the projects, and we so ignorant to the fact we don't even understand what projects really are. I see people that are staying in certain cities now, like Yazoo City. Yazoo City is not that big, and they swear they have projects. Yazoo City is not even big enough to have a project. The projects are big enough to sit over in Yazoo City, but people swear they have projects there because they glorify that. They did a documentary and they found people in Yazoo City to sit around and talk, and they bragging on being drug dealers and caught bodies and kill people. These are our own people talking down because instead of glorifying the beauty of what Yazoo City has overcome, that was once a very segregated town. But we focus so much on the wrong things where we don't understand what's right anymore. We don't know how to vote because they'll come to our church and tell us to vote, but this is somebody, uncle, cousin, or friend telling us how to vote, and it's not for the betterment of us. They were speaking against charter schools, telling people, you're going to lose your job if you vote for these charter schools because charter schools are different. Our education system are failing our children because we don't give my baby a grade and pass my baby instead of truly educating on them. We can't even truly educate them on the culture of Black history. I have worked at a school that you couldn't even teach Black history. You didn't have it in their history books. For Black History Month, it was not celebrated. The kids knew nothing about Black history. Every time I asked them a question, everything was Bill Cosby or Martin Luther King Jr.
And Coretta, that's the very point I was trying to make out why Mitch McConnell and them are trying to keep Mitch McConnell and others like him are trying to keep the teachings now of the 1619 Project and critical race theory out of the school because me myself coming through school, we weren't educated on that. You know, we had a curriculum and they had to follow the curriculum. That wasn't a part of the curriculum. But now we have received education. But me, myself, is now starting to be educated. And the reason people don't know about their towns, don't know about how they dissing their fellow workers and stuff, because they have not been educated on the truth. They still teaching that those lies in civics and in social about George Washington. America was discovered by Christopher Columbus in 1776. That was a lie, but they still teaching. They don't want to change those lies. They still want to glorify those lies, and that's the big problem. That's the whole problem. This segment, Table for Queens, and our discussion. And if anybody viewing, they are getting educated on what we're talking about. And maybe just like me watching Roland Martin Unfiltered and hearing them, I went and got some of the information about the book that they were talking about, that you need to get the book, The Color of Law, and read the book. I got the book and I see what they talking about. I'm getting educated on knowledge. And I understand why people don't know. We kept it hidden because a lot of people right now, Coretta, we don't want to hear about slavery. Why y'all talking about that? We talking about it because you need to know about it. People don't want to hear about it now. You know, why they want to bring up old stuff? Because that old stuff can help you in wondering what is going on with you right now. What is going on in the working world? Why you are being overlooked and underpaid for jobs? Why you don't, why some people don't have to go to school and they rise above you? That's why you need to be educated on these things. I understand completely why people don't know, because I didn't know. But now I'm fixing myself so I can know. And it's when having this conversation right now, it's educating people. So we are doing what we need to do. We getting the word out.
And then hopefully they take heed to the law. Right, because some people will quit a job, and we also have to understand this on certain jobs, and we'll take a back seat. You have women in the workforce, and we take more stuff because we feel like we have to feed our families. You have a lot of Black men and they still living in this era saying we oppressed, but we have to change that narrative and stop putting these situations in our head saying, oh, well, you got a mental disorder or you oppressed. It's going to always be something. And if we don't stand for something, and Malcolm X coined that term, you know, it did not start him, but if we don't stand for something, we going to fall for anything. Frederick Douglass even said, we enslaved. A man cannot be enslaved if he has knowledge. And like you said, it's knowledge, because knowledge is powerful. The one thing they didn't want us to do was read a book. And this is the narrative that I want to put out here. So please, anybody that's listening, stop saying the white man wrote the Bible. The white man, have you ever thought the white man always call it his Bible because he don't want anybody to read something that speaks on love, something that speaks on friendship, something that speaks on forgiveness and overcoming. That's what that book speaks about. That book don't tell you white man, my master. Stop letting people put them lies in your head, because that's the biggest thing that we discredit our history too. The churches were the storehouse. The churches is where they went to educate themselves on politics and stuff that was going on. That's why you found so many people burning down churches. If the white men had so much strong belief in church, do you think they would have touched a church house and burned them down? They forget about the history of the 4 little black girls that when they bombed these churches. They start bumming and burning down those churches because those churches help raise money so those people can go and march and do different things to put those words out here. We have to change that narrative. Yes, it's true that a lot of things in the churches are not right, but you got to pick up something and read it for yourself. Black people didn't even know how to read the Bible during that time. They knew of God. I had a conversation with somebody one day. They was like, people in Africa don't believe, and it's like, I had 2 African American teachers, and the one thing that he told us, he was like, that's why Africans that are truly Africans that come over there, that's why they don't like African Americans here in America, because they said we ignorant and we don't know our own culture, because we choose not to learn it. We choose not to have knowledge. And the first thing he said, don't y'all know a part of slavery was bargaining? They traded. The people over there in Africa that went to prison, the white man came on down boats and like, hey, let us get some of y'all slaves, because Africans had slaves too. Let us get some of y'all slaves and the people that y'all have in prison, and we gonna take them over here of America and they gonna work. When the white people started trading, and mind you, it costs money for them to go back for it on trip. When they seen it took 10 white men to do the work of 1 black man, because we had that strength. We was used to being out there in the sun. White man was not, they was dying. So they brought them back over here. So then they got to this point, they realized they friendly with them. They realized that you had, so then they started offering sugars and different candies for the trade with them. And then one of the very last thing they did, that's when they started going up, we got guns. They don't have guns. So they started coming over and they started getting you. Even though some of them were sold by masters, and they'll tell us some of them were sold for prices. But then they had guns where they started coming on and putting all of them over here. But we don't get that message because we want to follow everything on where people believed in God and the God did it. White people killed you for reading the Bible because they didn't want you to read it, because they knew it was going to give you knowledge. That same northern star that we read, that same northern star that they had, that they followed, and that's what gave them directions. But we missed that part of history. Even maps, they made maps from people's own blood so they can go back and read it. They strived it upside the wall because people were learning to read. They didn't want you to read because they knew that a black man that had knowledge, he was powerful. That's what the Black Panthers taught our people. Educate yourselves. Give back to your communities, give back to your families. Now, the traditional thing, that's the greatest strength that they had coming out of slavery. They put more pride in their families. We don't even have pride in families anymore. We have even changed the game to families in our communities. We turn families against each other. We war with each other. If one family member got the most, we don't even know how to come together in families in our home. Like, we are so broken as a community because the only thing we focus on now is self-indulgence of what we want. We have taken the pride out of everything that our ancestors have died and shed blood for. Ida B. Wells was one that Sue coming out of right along with after the Civil War. She sued. She was a teacher. You had so many that sued. If we get on these jobs and we feel like we being underpaid, you have a labor board. You can sue. Instead of jumping up, quitting that job because you got so much pride and you missing out on feeding your families, sue them. Beat them at their own game, because they don't expect us to sue because they feel like we don't know. They feel like they're going to dehumanize enough and make us so mad and we're going to walk away. And that same job you walked away from, you replace where they're going to have somebody right there in your spot.
And another thing, another reason why they didn't want to abolish slavery or get rid of slavery, slavery was a multi-million-dollar business. It was a big business. I mean, a big business. And they the white people didn't want to give up slaves,
They didn't
because
want
if they gave up slaves and let slaves free, they was giving up a lot of money.
money.
And you know, white people are all about wealth. If they have to steal, kill, borrow, or whatever to get it, they're gonna get it. And when we can see in the world today, people that when what's that happened, and then people start killing themselves and killing their children and wives because they didn't want to be poor. They didn't want to be poor. It's
The
something with,
stock market crashing.
Yeah, when they started my
yeah,
craze the first time, when they're doing the Bill Clinton era or something, when people start killing themselves because they didn't want to be
they
poor.
were killing themselves, jumping out windows and stuff doing back then, you know. They don't want to live. Wealth is what keeps them going because they don't know how to do anything. They don't know how to do anything. The only thing they knew how to do, and they couldn't do that well, was own slaves. Because slaves got to be smart, because there were some white people that didn't agree with slavery, and they were
Right.
teaching slaves.
They
And,
were.
and that's why America today know that the Caucasian race, which they are not white, they call them melanates. They're melanated. The race is becoming the minority, because why you can tell it, the Black Lives Matter marches, all those marches,
More white people.
how all them white
More,
was
more
out
white
there.
people.
They were out
They
there
were
marching against that injustice.
fighting harder for us
And
than we
they
fight for
don't want,
ourselves.
they don't want the people, they don't want us or them to know the truth.
Mm-mm.
Because the Bible says ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. And they don't want us to know the truth. But we got to study our own, like the Bible, study to show yourself approved. You got to study and read
But
to
that's the one.
educate yourself and help educate others.
That's the one thing they won't. I mean, that's the one thing they won't do. Malcolm X and Martin Luther King taught us to educate ourselves. People take pride in the education now because this is the job and the career I'm gonna get. Back then, they took pride in education because they wanted better for our people. We needed more lawyers and doctors. Thurgood Marshall came to Valley, his son came to Valley State, and he did a speech, and he was talking about all the things of his dad. And he said, one main thing that my dad taught me, and this is what he said, because he was harping us on his daddy for to fix his bike, but his daddy was fighting a big law case at the time. He didn't have time to fix his bike. And he said his dad apologized, and one day he said, son, I did the best I could with what I had, because he was basically saying that my father educated me to teach me. You needed me, and I'm here with you. But it's a bigger race that needs me, because in order for you to truly be free, I got to make sure that all of our race are free, because as long as we got this injustice, it's an injustice everywhere. And now we are slow to speak on
Everywhere.
injustice. Scared. We scared. And it's not just blacks that were enslaved. You had Vietnamese that were enslaved. You had
Right.
that was enslaved. It wasn't just us. The Native Americans, they killed them off once. The Native Americans taught them how to cultivate the land, how to grow, because they didn't know none of that. They were saying it was not that they were smarter than us. They were bullies. America was bullies. They have been come for so long to take things that were not rightfully theirs. And then when the Native Americans sued for to even get half of their land back, a lot of them do get checks every year. But what is a check? And you didn't put them so far off on these reservations where they don't have all the tools and the things that they need, and they dying off at young ages because they don't have medical doctors. They don't have the right clinics and different things like that. You still have people that are still enslaved here in America today. You have them where they still go there in Africa. In New York City, they have people that are enslaved in their homes, and they mistreat them because they go get them because they don't have green cards. And it's not just African Americans. You still have so many people still in slavery, and that's the thing that they don't want to talk about. Now the sexual trade is run rapid because so many people have different sexual desires. That's another thing that we don't talk about, how they kidnapping young girls, especially a lot of little black girls that they don't put on the news, and they say these little girls miss because they being sex trafficked. Families don't never see them no more, and they don't have they're constantly coming up with laws to fight that. And if we got intelligence enough to beam down and drop a bomb anywhere, you can't tell me we ain't got enough intelligence to find all these people that's missing. It's a choice because they put their dollars where they want them to be. They fight the laws they want to be fought.
Yeah. And then and like I said, a lot of poor white people, it hurt them because when poll taxes was levied on people, they didn't look at your income. They didn't care what you made. They are set an amount, and you had to pay poll taxes in order to vote in the national races, the national election. So a lot of poor people were left out because they didn't have that money as well. And there's a lot of poor white people. And it's ironic that white America don't want to talk about the other poor white Americans. That is much more of them than it is of our race. But they don't want to talk about them. They have nothing for them now. They have nothing for them. They call them names like trailer trash or whatever. Nothing for trailer trash. However, they still put trailer trash above us. They won't talk about them, but they have nothing for them. But they still want to put them above us. But true. I'm not, I'm not anybody's slave. I'm gonna fight for, and I'm gonna try to educate all people. Because Martin Luther King didn't get killed because he went to help the sanitation workers in Memphis. A lot of Dr. King's meetings we hadn't seen, or heard. But Dr. King had a lot of conversation about economic empowerment.
He did.
And when Dr. King started preaching economic empowerment, they didn't like that. And they had to get rid of him because he was teaching us, he was making us rise up. He was rising up the race that they wanted to keep under their feet. Right. And they assassinated Dr. King for preaching economic empowerment.
But
and Dr. King said, hey, he was coming. He said, we coming to Washington, D.C., and we coming for our check.
Right. And he had already speaking because that's what he was saying. If we boycott these buses, if you force their hand to show them that we can build our own, and coming out of that era, you had more Black-owned businesses then. You had more Black-owned businesses. You had home ownership. Blacks was building their own houses because that was during that time in that era where they were sticking together. The Black Panthers was teaching economic empowerment. Teach your own, feed your own. They had where kids can go get meals if you couldn't feed, because you coming in those big cities, you had those projects. When they started those projects, and once them projects got out of hand, when they could see what we can put all y'all over here, just throw y'all to the wayside. It's like we putting y'all in a community, we pitting y'all against each other. The drug trade was heavy. When so many people got on drugs and started selling drugs, it's like it's within our community, but I don't understand why they missed the big concept. We didn't have the means and the modes to go over there and get them drugs. We didn't make them drugs and bring them over here. Where do they think those drugs came from?
And the big opioid thing come about. See, they didn't give Black African Americans, when we went to the hospital, we said we were hurting. They didn't give us no pain medicine. They thought we were lying and wanted to be drug addicts and stuff. But then they was giving them to the white. That's where the opioid explosion come from. A lot of them got hooked on all those narcotics. And then Black Wall Street, Black Wall Street, or the Tulsa Massacre of 1924, the Greenwood community, that's what it's called. They were self-sufficient. They didn't need the white man dollar, but the white man needed their dollars. And what did they do? Bomb. You bomb your own people. The United States Air Force come in and bomb the Greenwood community in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1924.
And that's the one thing in history. You don't even see it in the history books. You do not see it in
you won't see it in the history
book. They do not speak about that. What's the Sherry, remember the other guy that burned down the communities? What is it? Jim Brown. Well, he burned down white communities. You don't hear about him, but he burned down a whole white community.
John Brown. Yeah. History tells us that he collaborated with Frederick Douglass. And it says that all night Frederick Douglass begged him and tried to convince him not to do it. And John Brown spent that whole night trying to convince Frederick Douglass to do it. So history tells us that John Brown, who was a white man, he felt like it was his call from God to end slavery. So, and I was a little disappointed when they did the Harriet Tubman movie and they did not focus a little more on him. You know, I think it's important that we say, you know, clear on here that the only race God cares about is the human race. And you do have exceptions. So, you know, it's to not generalize that all African Americans, all blacks are this way, nor saying that all whites are that way. But John Brown went and he literally set on fire the entire town. And he killed whites. He felt like it was his assignment from God. He actually, when he was a child, he saw a slave, a young slave boy who the owners did not feed him. If you've ever seen a dog where the owners did not take care of that dog, and this baby was like this, according to history. John Brown witnessed his uncle beat and kill a slave that was a child, but the child, they never fed the child. They did not properly take care of the child. And history tells us that from that moment on, he became a minister. So John Brown, white man, was a minister, and he literally set the town on fire. He was murdered. They actually killed him, although there was a bounty out for Frederick Douglass, and he made his way to Canada. So I'll squeeze this in before I let you awesome ladies go back to, you know, what we're talking about. But Frederick Douglass took his family to Canada at that time. He knew the route, he knew the way, he was educated, and he did not have the means that we have today. Frederick Douglass did not. So again, that's me emphasizing education, and no one, nowhere is holding us back. Whatever land we have, we can take that land and we can build, we can train, we can teach our own. And going through the process to gain license, to become a licensed teacher. And it was important to me to pour that life into all students. Every child that has ever sat in front of me, I wanted to pour love into them and the importance of educating themselves.
And look, so is that where that song come from? John Brown body lays a mourning in the grave or something like that.
Maybe so. PBS has an awesome documentary.
Showtime had a miniseries about it, and it was showing how radical he was. See, some people thought he was crazy because he was like, go hard for God, and I know this is not right. Some people thought he was crazy because he was a radical. So it was a show that they put on Showtime. The name of the show was, I just pulled up, it was called The Good Lord Bird, and it focused on John Brown and the history and the historical impact that he did have on slavery. That's why I said we take out of context. It wasn't just Harriet Tubman out there fighting. It was not. And a lot of white people did help her, especially Quakers. The Underground Railroad is not an actual Underground Railroad for some that don't know. It was under people's houses they hid, in their cellars, inside the walls, wherever they could hide, they was letting them hide to bring them forth to freedom, because you could go up north. And as long as you was working, they would let you buy land, even though it had to be on the outskirts. They gave you at least a piece of history. It probably wasn't what we wanted, but it was. And I remember when I wanted to teach my students this, and we had to go to U.S. history test, and one show that I let them watch, and I was proud of those students, so I would give big ups to that class. We watched The Underground. And I never would watch The Underground, and my daughter was gung-ho, and she was like, watch The Underground. And it was so good because it's a depiction of history, and it shows. It speaks on John Brown. It's not going to give his whole name because it is going to speak on Harriet Tubman. It's going to show how they banded together, how they came out of slavery. It's going to speak about what the name was, the Macon Five, the Georgia something, the little slave group that band together. It speaks on all that historical content. So even if people don't want to read, there's a lot of good historical content out there, little shows. It's so much out there, and we have to educate ourselves. We have to teach our children better so they can learn to band together, because that phrase will always be true. United we stand, and divided we fall. We got to start back sticking together. Even the men and the women in our society, we have to be leaders for ourselves. We had women leaders, we had male leaders. Then it didn't matter if it was man or a woman. Even if woman voices were unheard, we had our platform. And we got to learn to stick together in unity. We got to get past all the BS that they push on us, because if we do not stand together, we forever gonna be a generation that's lost. Our ancestors is like they shed blood for nothing if we continue to lose ourselves. Everything cannot be bought. We have to speak on economic development. If we know something, pass it on. Pass on the torch. We should not be like crabs in a bucket, scared of he or she gonna get more than me.
Right, and that unity includes our white counterparts also. that unity includes all races.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just,
And I
you know,
had,
the blacks binding together. It's
and
go
I
ahead.
viewed a copy of a literacy test that blacks or white people had to take in order to vote. And it was a literacy test for the state of Alabama. And it was a 3-page, 6-8 question. And I promise you, I was reading them questions. I never would have been able to vote. I couldn't, I couldn't answer those questions. And then, I had to study and find the information, so they had so many roadblocks and voting and all of that. And that's why I say it's so important to vote. But what's more important, you be sure you voting for the right person for the right reason.
Yes.
Not because they my friend. Well, I known them for so long, and they get in there and don't do diddly squat for nothing, for nobody. So we just got to educate and keep educating and keep talking. And it was another point I was gonna make, but it kind of left my memory. But maybe it'll come back to me.
Yeah.
If not today, another day, because I was coming to write notes down.
It's something you have to, because our history is so long. We have a rich history, and our history is just not about slavery, because like I said, we have so much in our history. We have overcome so many things, and we have more resources now than ever. It's just the issue is we have to get out of this crabs in a bucket mentality. We have to get out of if he or she is better than me. We have to get out of the destruction. And it's like, honestly, if we think about what is coming from the destruction within our own community, how can we change the destruction within our own communities?
And then everybody, y'all, have y'all heard about the West Point School District situation?
Mm-hmm.
Where for the first time, they had a top Val and Sal. In 2018, they had a Val and Sal, just 2 people. But this year, they want to say that they had announced the Val and Sal, which was African American women. And then they come hold, they changed something about the QPA and the GPA, which is to me the same thing. And so the African Americans had the highest GPA. So how can the African Americans have the highest GPA, but then you had a set of whites that had the highest QPA? How is that? If I got the highest GPA and my QPA gonna be up there too. But what happened was they announced the blacks at school. Then the Board of Education, along with the superintendent, the whites are prominent family in West Point. So they wanted their children to get the recognition. They went to the superintendent. Of course, he didn't inform the other kids. They found out through Instagram that they had selected another Val and another Sal. So now you got white Vals and white Vals, black Vals, white Sal, back and black Sal. And it made the Roland and Martin Unfiltered show, the BNC News. It made the local news. Okay, and then the other thing about it is the little girl said, yes, she was angry about it because they wasn't gonna tell them at all. The superintendents said that they should just be thankful. And I can't remember the other part what he said. Thankful, blah, 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 blah. Okay. And then on the day of graduation, they let the whites speak first. My thing is, why we always got to be at the back? The superintendent is African American. He used to be a principal, my principal, when I worked in Starksville. And I made a call to him. Of course, they said he was busy, but I let him know tell him Dr. Ware called. Well, I hadn't heard from him yet, but he know what's going on. I didn't understand why you, a man of integrity, why you allowed that to happen. I don't understand it.
Right. I'm not totally familiar with the situation. I did hear of it, and I think when it comes to the content like that, and I want to honestly say, and it's just my opinion. So to any viewer that's watching or anything like that, mind you, this is our opinion. The things that we are speaking on from history, those are facts. But when it comes to this, as a school teacher, from what I do know, the QPA and the GPA is supposed to be reflective of the same thing. It's your quality point average, and it's also for your grade point average. Most colleges look at your GPA because the GPA is actually supposed to give your class rank. I think anytime they find a loophole, and we have seen this throughout history, anything they find a loophole, and it said, and it is our people always perish for the lack of knowledge. So anybody that's seen that, you're gonna have some that's gonna argue the point, oh, the QPA. No. In actuality, from the school system when I was working in, from what I was always taught, even when I went to college or whatever, I was always taught the GPA is the outweigh of anything. The QPA is basically supposed to be the same exact thing, but the GPA was always what gave you your class ranking. I think he was afraid. I think they become afraid because as a community, we don't stick together and we are still listed as a minority. And I think he was also afraid of his paycheck. I think he knew that he was going to get backlash from his community, but at the end of the day, I think his ultimate goal is his career. Because if I go against them, what if they blackball me? But
he's been in education maybe 30 years. He's well until he probably been in there long enough. He probably paying the state to teach. He wouldn't worry if they had got rid of him or he lost his job. He wouldn't have suffered anything as far as monetary. Now he may have suffered maybe a little reputation, but they forget about that soon or another. But his reputation is ruined now. So hey, if they have an election system, I don't know if at West Point superintendent is elected or appointed. And if it's appointed by the school board. So I don't know what makes up the school board. But if you're elected by the people, oh yes, he's ruined. But I think that what he done, what he did, the black and the white separated, I think he's appointed. Because if he was elected by the people, he never would have done it. He's appointed.
Now let me add a little bit to y'all conversation, if I can.
Yes, sir.
They interviewed Mr. McDonald a little while after that had happened, and what he said also was that they had a new guidance counselor, and the new guidance counselor appointed the valedictorian and the salutatorian based on QPA, right? But then in their handbook, and the handbook for the school that's been in existence for quite a while, it notes it says a student's rank in his or her graduating class will be calculated by averaging his or her semester averages. So Coretta, like you said, what should have been taken was the GPA. The new guidance counselor did the QPA. And so after all of that had been done, then it seemed that he was trying to gather, and make the situation one that everybody could tolerate. So now I don't know if, like I said, if the article is true, then we can't necessarily hold his feet to the fire, even though he is the superintendent. We can't necessarily hold his feet to the fire if the guidance counselor was the one who made the announcement and made the determination.
But then way the school system work, and I've been on the school board for 12 years. And the way that thing worked, the guidance counselor is not the sole person making a decision. The guidance counselor has to turn her information and how she calculated in to the principal,
School
and
secretary,
the superintendent and the committee. So they can stop lying on the new lady. That's just a cover up. That's just a cover up. It's a step. When it comes to graduation, no one person gonna make that decision by themselves. You talk to that person. You talk to that person, and my thing is, you don't even have to do no calculation. The computer calculates for you. All you have to do, put it in the computer. The computer does the calculation. So ain't nothing she had to do by hand.
Right. And like I said, I can't solely.
And I've been knowing Mr. McDonald a long time.
Right. And I can't solely speak on this.
That wrong.
Right. I can't solely speak on the situation because I wasn't there in school. But the only thing I do know as being a senior advisor, because even like you said, it's a check and balance system. Because once they turn all that in, it's gonna be the school secretary working together. It's gonna be whoever the senior advisor is during that time. It's gonna be the principal, and as well, it's gonna be the guidance counselor. But everybody's supposed to have checks and balances because even when she did that, and even if she was new, you still follow the old rules and the old curriculum because it don't change. 'Cause whatever you don't know, you have a guidebook and everything that you're supposed to read by, and you always have the state data and the information. Not saying that she didn't make the error, Mr. Luton. So, like I said, I understand what you're saying, especially if they put that out there in the article. But I think this time he's using a scapegoat system, and I think, and it could have been an oversight, maybe he wasn't paying attention to it, but that's a huge error to overlook because normally when you have a val and a sal, they start predetermining that normally by their 10th grade year. They're gonna look at them 9th and 10th grade scores. So starting in 11th and 12th grade, they're gonna reflect on all those same kids that started from the beginning for to see who's outranking and who's beating who. They started early once they enter a high school, and they always predetermine it every year because every year, once they get up to a new step, they always know who was the top ranking students from the 9th grade, 10th, 11th, and 12th. I hate that that happened, and especially he's supposed to be a leader, and those girls are gonna know forever for the rest of their life that black man failed them because they looked at him to fight for him because he was that principal. He was supposed to be their leader. So it's a sad situation because it's still gonna go down in history because now whenever you Google his name, it's gonna pull up for the injustice that he allowed to happen. His legacy is tarnished all for that one error or that one oversight or for that fear or whatever it was.
And that you saying that decision he made to try to make it best for everybody, that wasn't no good decision to bring the others on board because she made the mistake. That wasn't no good decision at all. Right is right and wrong is wrong, no matter who it is. I've been knowing Miss McDonald. He know better.
Yeah, it's a messed up situation, especially for those girls because you need that on your transcript because that's what the college looks at, and you get scholarships for being Val and Sal. You get more of a scholarship for being Val and Sal. So it's a way, and I don't know what is looking like on their transcript because they still have time to correct it. Now they can't say they can't correct it because you can. You can correct it.
And the Val had a 4.06. The Sal had a 4.04. The other two that they added, both of those GPAs was the same, a 4.02. Both of those had 4.02, so they was down. So my thing is, how can they have more quality points when they ranked third and fourth? It doesn't make sense. But anyway, a lot of things in this world don't make sense.
It doesn't. I don't know. It's like we at a point there, it's like, but honestly, what can we do to change the narrative? Even in our careers, it's like, what can we do? Because I know even if we're not saying, I know on our jobs we see certain things that they allow other races to do that we cannot. They have a check and balances, even within the school system. From working in the school system, and I'm gonna be honest, the school system is not perfect in no kind of way. We have to change our school system. Our students are failing because of how they rank our students as well, from how they look at our students. And
But
even as
parents
parents,
have
they're listening. Yeah, I would say even as parents, for the parents that's listening, you got to stop pointing the finger at the teachers because it starts at home too. Respect starts at home. And
and you
children have
got
came into a point, into a norm now saying, well, I'm not gonna respect them if they don't respect me. But it's hard for a teacher to constantly respect a child and you come in and you disrespectful. You call the parent on the phone and the parent come up there disrespectful. And we got to stop pointing where they come from a broken home. A lot of us come from broken homes. That does not still give anyone the right to be disrespectful. And even in the broken home communities, a lot of men and women have to step up when it comes to parenting their children because it does start at home too. If we got enough pride in ourselves, we should have enough pride into being more responsible and taking care of our children and treating them fairly and equal too. Because that does mess with kids. Because we know even in the school system, you have so many kids wanting to commit suicide because things are not right. We as a community have forgotten the strength of our community. We have gotten the strength that was God given to us. But to me, as for everyone, how can we change the narrative? How can we be better toward each other?
And we got to address it the way you addressed it, Coretta. You got to start right for the school system. A group. A group has to go and meet with the superintendent. Tell him your issues. Have your facts in order, because people don't come up there rowdy. Come with facts and intelligence, because they feel our children are not intelligent as it is. Come with facts and intelligence, and you stay there and you visit. That's the way. And we tend to get tired so fast. We get tired. Anything that takes effort, we get tired and we stop. My father told me, and I remember it, and I'm gonna remember it till the day I die, and I pass it on to my children, grandchildren. Anything worth having is bought with a price. There's a price you have to pay for anything. There's a price. Are you willing to pay the price? Now that's the question. Are you willing to pay the price?
So does somebody need to go to 14 then, Jen?
Yeah.
And then on your job, read your job description. Know about your job. If you're in these federal jobs and with these unions, read your union contract, so you know what to do and how to do it and how to go about it. You got to learn your job. Learn your job description, learn everything about your job. You know, so you won't just get out there and be like in an ocean without a sail, in a boat without a sail.
Ms. Hooper, any suggestions? You still within the school system. What can we do as parents to help you better as a teacher, especially with our own? What can we do as parents?
Well, I think that we must consider the facts. The public school systems require a standardized test. We can debate all night about those tests, but nevertheless, we have tests. So if we can group together to ensure that the teacher has everything that she needs in order to make sure that the students are successful at passing these standardized tests. Of course, we know in the private arena, there are no tests. So the anxiety and the stress that's associated with this third grade assessment, private school students, they don't have that. But ours, on the other hand, we do. We either do one or two things: support your teachers or get together and start your own private school.
Kim, you work in the medical field, in the hospital setting. We have a misconception of African Americans do not like to go to the doctor. We wait till our health get bad and go. What's a misconception? Where do we need to help African Americans to go more into the doctor for the checkup on their health? What can we do more to help that as well?
Again, creating those groups and educating people on the things, because we like you said, throughout the years we've seen where people are against us. Things are not for us. They're not going to take care of us. I'm going to get to the hospital and they're going to treat me worse than what I was before I went in. So there's this stigma that we have. So education is the key. Unity is the key. And like I think Ms. Doris said, don't give up. We give up so easy. As
Mr.
parents,
Luke.
as teachers, as so many things, we have to fight. You know, back then our ancestors, they fought until change came, and we don't. We are defeated so easily.
Mr. Lou, as being the only man on here, what advice that you have for our Black men? What would you tell them? What's a big misconception that we as women also get about Black men? How can you better help us with that issue?
But now, my policy on that, I'm strictly for family. And I don't mean families in the sense of a mother and children. I mean families in the sense that there's a father in the home. I can't underscore that enough, because what happens is what we're discussing primarily is structure. Individuals who move about in society, we're governed by particular rules. And if you're not familiar with the rules that apply, then how can you be successful? And so a lot of times, as men, there are certain things that we have to pass on to our children. And one of those things is discipline and structure. So when you see rules in your adult life, when you see things that you have to adhere to, it's not a problem because you were raised with rules. You were raised with certain expectations. So when you see them, it's not a problem. You can quickly adapt and then you can go on to be successful. But I stay on my brothers about that. If you've seen anything I've done, I'm not cutting any slack because, listen, if you're not going to be a part of this family dynamic, then you got to understand that what you're doing is you're handicapping your children. And that's just something that nowadays, that's not something that we can allow to continue to go on because it's destroying a lot of young women and a lot of young men. So what I would say is be active. Even if you're not with, the mother of your children, the relationship that you have with the mother has nothing to do with the relationship you have with your children. Because I know for me, myself, I'm good at math. So my daughter knows who to come to when it's time to talk about math. Now she might go to her mother when it's English or anything else like that, because I never like to read. I love math. So she knows who to come to. So it's those kind of relationships that we have to foster in our children, because if you don't, then like we mentioned, it's going to create difficulties going forward.
I agree. And I know Kim can speak on this, and Ms. Hooper, from working in the school system, you do have a lot of children that are not used to rules. You do have a lot of children that do come from broken homes. You do have a lot of children that are seeking that dynamic. But so I agree with what you're saying. We have to take accountability in all realms. And back in our history, even if we look at it, if some fathers were not in the home, the community have raised a child. The men came together, and if it was a widow, they mowed the widow's yard or something like that, and they taught the children structure. The football coaches were allowed to be active parents to those children. They taught them rules and structures. But now we have come to the point of the football coach yells too loud at our children, we want to come and cuss them out. It's like we have failed that structure. We have to take accountability. Anyone else has any input?
One thing I want to, have y'all ever heard of, and this is just something I was recently introduced to, 1965, the Moynihan Report. Have y'all heard about that?
No.
The Moynihan?
Moynihan.
The Moynihan Report. No, I'm not familiar with the Moynihan Report.
And see, I wasn't either, but what it was the president at the time, and it fails me who the president was in 1965. I think it was Lyndon B. Johnson.
Lyndon B. Johnson, yeah, it was.
So this guy Moynihan was serving under President Johnson, and he published a report. And his report was about the crisis that the Negro family was going to face in the United States in the years after 1965. And it was, I promise you all, it's a good read. I know it's it's very technical, but what it is everything, well, not everything, but mostly everything that he put in this particular report is what we're seeing now. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, how is it that this was a report that was available to the public, and then you got information in it that's geared toward helping us as a community, and we didn't know anything about it? It was, it's kind of striking to me, because he talks about in the report how systematically that the men would be removed from the households. He talked about how single parent families are going to go up. He talked about how there will be inadequate jobs for men. And so, it was like a snowball effect, and he put that in his report. And I guess I can see now why y'all was mentioning Dr. King and Malcolm X and the Black Panthers and all of them. I guess this is the reason why they wanted us to do for ourselves. Because if this was going to be the eventuality of everything from what this report said, then we needed to act right then to try to correct some of the things that were going to happen in the future. And just like the report said, mostly everything that's in this report came true. And I just thought it was something to add to the conversation.
Well,
I'm looking
I
at,
feel
I'm,
imprisonment. Imprisonment. They were looking at imprisonment because private prison is a big industry as well. Imprisoning the father, uh, and all these murders. And I think the maybe the Monahan report, they look into who was ruling the country, and who was going to rule the country, and they know what was going to take place. They, as while we sleep, you have people that are the likes of the Donald Trumps in the world, the Mitch McConnells in the world, even the Joe Bidens in the world. Those people be up while we sleeping, plotting and planning on what they're gonna do and what direction they're gonna go in. And I mean, and I look at, even though we have a president Joe Biden, I look Joe Biden still is a white man, and the same people that was in office when Obama was in there are the same individuals that's in there when Biden in there, and they didn't let Obama do anything. But Joe Biden come in because he's white. He have gotten to do a lot of things that Obama wasn't, allowed to do just because he's white. And a lot of things that Joe Biden have campaign on, he done reneged on things. Reneged on a lot of things that he had campaigned on.
I think a lot of
So
that comes from fear. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off. What you were saying?
no, I was finished.
Oh, I think a lot of it comes from fear because as he just spoke up that Monahan report, I just pulled up some of it now because I'm familiar with the policies of President Lyndon B. Johnson. That was one of the areas that I was more structured in when I was teaching. And Lyndon B. Johnson signed into law after Martin Luther King Jr. died because they assassinated JFK. So he went on ahead and he finished out that movement and he started a lot of policy programs. It says here that the Negro family, the case for the national action, commonly known as the Monahan report, was a 1965 report on Black property in the United States, written by Daniel Patrick Monahan, an American sociologist, serving as the Assistant Secretary of Labor. Basically, to sum it up, he said the issue was going to be with the Black home was the rise in single motherhood in families was not because of the lack of jobs, but it's going to be by the destructive vein in the ghetto culture, which could be traced to the slavery times and continued discrimination in the American South under Jim Crow. He also concluded that the rise of hip hop was going to help destroy the American family. He also said it was going to be a war on poverty, and the more that they gave out to Blacks, meaning in welfare and different other programs, it was going to destroy the American home because he said 25, it was a higher gap in it, meaning more whites will stay pretty much married and more white men will stay in the home than Black men. So he was saying that positive, it was like we pretty much have a war on ourselves and it's a war against the nuclear family. It is true that a lot of our men do go to prison, but it is also true that Black men are more likely, according to these reports and statistics, are more likely to leave the family home because of the gap of the ghetto culture. And the ghetto culture does normalize. Kim shared a post earlier today how they normalize Black men going and have different babies and not raising different babies. How Black men are normalizing raising other children that are not their own because that's what the ghetto culture glamorized now. That's what you hear in hip hop music. So it has a lot on there dealing with that. And it's not necessarily on the Black men because we as Black women have to take accountability for a lot of things too. But just looking at some of this Monahan report, but Lyndon B. Johnson did start a lot of different things for the African American families, and that was coming right after the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. JFK started it. A lot of things that Biden did promise, you have to think about it. A lot of those presidents got assassinated. The more that they did for Blacks, they took them out because they shot JFK. Killed him in Texas. They killed Abraham Lincoln for signing into those laws. Remember, so I'm not gonna say that's why not Biden is not upholding his promise. But as you said, um, everything that Barack tried to do, they voted against, and that's what we have to educate our people on as well. Because even though it says the president has absolute balance, it's also a check and balance system. They have to vote on. You have the House of Senate, and you have the House of Representatives, has to be voted on. And during Barack's time, he was outweighed. The Republicans ruled. Now we're in an era where it's balanced, so a lot of things Biden can get established because he has a different platform than what Obama had.
But it's still not balanced because you have two Democratic senators that working with Republicans. So
Yeah.
it's not balanced. And then just like Obama had some executive authorities too. But one thing about they try to go bipartisan. We were on bipartisan decision where Mitch McConnell made it very plainly. He said his job is to make sure 100% that the Democrat Party would not get anything done. Now he said this, and I heard him say it. So with the Democratic Party can forget bipartisanship, there's some executive powers that Biden can do that he just not doing. Because if Donald Trump did all that executive power stuff, then I'm sure Biden has executive power too. Biden just don't want to do it. Not yet. Not yet. He don't want to do it yet. But it's been made clear that the Republicans are not working with the Dems. How can you not get HR 1 and HR 2 passed? It's awful.
Right. And Shell also just said something in the chat, and this is true, and it goes back to what Mr. Luton introduced the Monahan report. It said that Willie Lynch had a letter, and he basically said the secret to control black slaves was setting them against each other. And we know they set black slaves against each other because you had what they called, and excuse my language, but let's just speak in plain English. You had what they called the house nigger and the field nigger. You also had what they called the one that he chose to sleep with and the ones that he whipped and gave many stripes. You also had the light skin versus the dark skin. And you also see that in our communities now. We pitch the women against each other. The men pitch each other against each other. We are at a war against each other. We are quicker to destroy each other's homes because we feel like we have a right to this. We have to speak truth on certain issues. Our black community is divided because we have constantly fell into that trap of what they wanted us to. And this letter was all the way back in 1712. And they also do that with the Republican and Democrat Party, because even though some of them say they Democrat, they still are more for Republican policies. They pitch us against each other and we fall for it. We fall for it. The American dream has failed for African Americans because this is so much is true, and we see it. We see it in every part of our lives. We see it on the job. They'll give you a title to help pit you against the other one. It was no different from the field nigga that they put at the head of the field. I'm gonna give you a title so you can snitch on all the other slaves if I offer you a little more. It's no different on the job. I'm gonna give you a title so you can run and tell on everybody else. I'm gonna give you an extra few cents so they can feel you making more because I know you're gonna tell everybody. We pitch and that's in the school system. We pitch each other against each other. This is very much true, Shell. Thank you for sharing it. It's called the Willie Lynch letter. Also, Mr. Luton, he introduced and he posted his in the chat. It's called the Monahan report. I was reading some of that. You all please read that because as a community, that's one thing where we have to stop doing. We have to stop going against each other. We have to get to a point where we can be okay to agree to disagree, but we got to focus on the ultimate goal. I agree with what you said, Mr. Luton. Just because we are not the same parents in the same household, our children should be a bigger platform for us because our children are going to be the ones that are sitting in the White House one day. Our children are going to be the new senators in the House of Representatives because that's what we want to put them because we need more of us there to represent us. It starts with the values we put it in them. Back then within slavery, if anything that we read, they put those values into them. We got to stick together. You got to work hard. We don't even want to work hard anymore. Unemployment.
We don't want to send them to the White House. We want to send them to our local state houses because we need them to help make laws for our state.
That's true.
Send them to our state first to fix our state.
We need more lawyers and doctors because we still will be segregated if you did not have all those lawyers to come down here and help fight with Brown versus the Board of Education. If you didn't have them saying, no, we're going to desegregate these schools, they have a right to be there. So we need more lawyers and doctors as well. We need to fight more for ourselves because, as you said, even with the Black Lives Matter movement, it was not just blacks out there. It was more of other colors, different hues fighting harder for us than we fight for ourselves because we sit at home and we say, oh, they ain't gonna get nothing solved. They not finna do anything. But we can go on and on about this. We'll conclude it next week, you guys. We're gonna start hitting hard more on these topics. Thank you, Ms. Ware, Dr. Ware, for hitting more on these issues and bringing it to the light because we do. It has to start somewhere, and this is a table for queens and kings, Mr. Luton. So you are invited to come back anytime because we need to hear more of the Black male perspective. We need to. All of our voices matter, and we have to learn to stick together. Anyone would like to conclude? Is there anything before we sign off for tonight?
And Miss Jennifer, I hope you can join and you know, outside of work. So, because we like to hear your opinion as well.
And thank you so much, Miss Jennifer, for logging on, even for being at work, because I know that's a tough job to do. So that's greatly appreciated because we need to see more of our faces and hear more of our voices. It's a topic that matters because we all have children and we want the best for our children.
Well, I enjoyed it. Now I see what the table for queen is. So I enjoyed it.
Yes, ma'am. All right, thank you guys. Thank you so much for logging on. Ms. Ware, could you introduce the book one more time for us so we'll know the book that we need?
The book is entitled The Color of Law by Richard Rothenstein. And it says it's a forgotten history of how our government segregated America. And I'm really, I'm excited, I'm learning, I'm getting educated, but I'm really surprised of all the things that I didn't know that the government did, you know, to our race, to our races.
And also, Mr. Luton introduced the Monahan report. Please get that and read that because it speaks on our statistic, and it also letting you know how they spoke on us, letting us know how we were going to fall by the wayside. Also, what this Hooper put out here, please get the Willie Lynch letter showing that how they're going to play us against each other. And it does prevail. If we do not unite, we will always fall. Thank you guys so much. Very powerful discussion. We'll see you all next week at 6. Have a good evening.
All right.
I'm trying to get the recording off for it.